As Birdie mentioned, my name is Melissa Morris, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about some of the exciting opportunities that we have in our onshore environment as well. So to begin with a little bit about myself, I started my career in 2007 after graduating with my mechanical engineering degree from Michigan State University. And while I was in university, I did 2 internships with Shell. So one was in our onshore and one was in our offshore environments. When I hired on full-time in 2007, I started out as a completions and well interventions engineer in our South Texas group. So a couple of years later, that asset got sold, and I moved over as a completions engineer into our new Texas asset, which was called the Eagle Ford. 2011, I too did a broadening role, like Malcolm mentioned, and what I did is I went into, it was called our TOGS team, and what that stands for is Transforming the Onshore Supply Chain. And it was a joint project between our contracting and procurement group, our wells group, and our finance group. And what we were looking at is how do you really get value out of what at the time was a very tight supply market. During that time, I also did my round 1, so the first half of the fundamental engineering training. And then after completing that, in 2013, I moved back into the Eagle Ford to do what's called an operations team lead role. Used to be called, maybe more familiar to some of you, as a superintendent role. And in that role, it allows me to manage safety, to manage the execution of the operations in the field, and then to manage the field staff. So in 2013, I also completed law school. I've been going to law school part-time at the University of Houston. So I completed that program and took the Texas State Bar. And then in 2014, in addition to the operations team lead role, I picked up the engineering team lead role. And what this really means is that it allows me to manage not just engineers and the folks in the field, but the planning and execution of operations. Throughout all of that, one of the other exciting opportunities that I had was to organize and then attend the Global Wells Conference in Kuala Lumpur, which is where I was able to snap some of the photos that you can see in the background. And the Global Wells Conferences are something that we do internally every couple of years, and it allows us to leverage the fact that we are a global company and we have people across the board. So we do these internal conferences, which are presentations, networking events, and we really focus on both best practice sharing and how we manage and transition learnings from one asset to another. So let's talk a little bit, what do I mean when I say we have a global portfolio? So what you can see here are the various onshore locations that we have, and you can see we're very diverse. And we're in a variety of socio-political environments. And what this means is that we're constantly exploring for new property and focusing on developing our existing property. So no matter where you're at or where you want to go, there will always be opportunities for us. So what might you do in these various roles? So one thing that you might work on in an operations team lead role would be focusing, of course, on safety. And how do we make our operations both safer and more efficient? And one way that we're doing this is through the use of automation. And automation, the beauty of automation is it allows us to remove those errors that are inherent in human decision making. And 2 of the systems that we currently use and that you may have heard about are called SCADA and DART. And what these are real-time systems that allow for the real-time acquisition of data. It's a standardized package. You can put it on, say, a drilling rig. You get real-time data, you can get instantaneous analysis, and then feedback, and the system will automatically adjust the drilling parameters to help you increase your efficiencies. So this system has been used to improve our operations across the board, from Europe to the U.S. to Malaysia, Turkey, Nigeria, everywhere. Another way that software development is being used within our industry is tying back to something that Malcolm mentioned in terms of the blowout preventers, or BOPs, which are your main methods of well control. So if we look at the way in onshore that we've done BOP testing, it's basically unchanged for the last 100 years. So we're using 100-year-old technology in the form of chart recorders, a rig crew manually operating valves, and then notes, right? We document the test. So what we can do is through some fit-for-purpose type software and instrumentation is actually go back and retrofit these BOPs to fully automate the entire process. So this is something still in development, but of course if you come and if you see Shell, things that you will continue to see developing. And all this is focused on how do we eliminate that exposure to hazards and make sure that our business is safer. So what's one role that you might work as either, say, an engineer or something that I worked in a broadening assignment in my supply chain role? And that was really, how do we minimize our footprint? So something that we're very focused on is how do we minimize the environmental impact that we make as a result of our activities? And one way that we're doing this is through the use of pad drilling. And what pad drilling is where you drill multiple wells from the same surface location. And that, again, allows you to minimize your environmental footprint. Another way that we do this is through what we call simultaneous operations, or SIMOPs, which is where you do multiple activities on the same location at the same time. So you might be drilling one well and fracturing another or producing another, all in the same physical location. And what this means is that we reduce the amount of time that we're on site and we reduce the amount of time that we're impacting the environment. Another interesting project that had heavy involvement from both our engineers and our field staff is a pretty neat project up in Carmon Creek, which is in Alberta, Canada. And what they've done is there's a new challenge there. So in Carmon Creek, they're going to be drilling something like 50 well pads. And the challenge is, how do you take a conventional rig, which typically is drill one well, pick up and move, drill a second well, pick up and move, and keep drilling? How do you take that concept and really modernize it to where you can take the efficiencies of an existing system, break it all apart, put it back together, and figure out what it is that you need that system to do in this new environment? And so what they have created, it's a custom-built, they're called drilling machines, that allow them to efficiently drill 50 well pads to where they would be delivering one well every couple of days. And the way they've done that is by preserving some of the existing structures, so the mast, the derrick, the main parts of the rig, and then adding features to ensure delivery in an optimal fashion. So shared backyard, which is all the external equipment, multi-well slots, and a variety of other techniques that will allow us to get that optimization that we're looking for. And again, none of this could happen without some smart people and some really good involvement across the board in an integrated fashion, making sure that we can come up with a design, deliver it, execute it, and then build and run it in the field. Finally, something else you might work at, and this was a great integrated project, so engineers were involved, our field operations, and our contracting and procurement groups. I'm focused at how do we, again, reduce our environmental impacts through a variety of ways. It's not just early life, where we're talking about the pre-drilling. It extends all the way into the completions and production side. And what you see here is an image of where we actually converted some engines that typically pump, they're used to pump the hydraulic fractures, and they run on diesel. And what we were doing is we were converting them to run on natural gas, and in this case, LNG. And what you see in the photo is the DOC test, and it was the original test of why we were doing this. And the reason that we wanted to do this is because it not only means less emissions, it means less ambient noise. The engines actually run quieter. And it also means less fuel is being used to perform the same operation. So this was one example. One of our Canadian drilling rigs was also converted to run on natural gas. And there are currently some projects underway that are taking it one step further and actually looking at using the engines and running them on the gas that's produced from the well itself. So you can take the feedstock right out of what you're producing and recycle that in order to use it to power the next set of operations. Finally, something that extends throughout the operation, and Malcolm mentioned it in deep water, you'll see it throughout onshore, is how do we focus on making our operations safer? And this isn't just something that's limited to the field. You as an engineer would be heavily involved in this. And the reason is a lot of people tend to focus on how do you minimize the harm that comes from a hazard. And we've said that doesn't make any sense. How do we eliminate the hazard in the first place? And so what we call that is engineering out the hazard. What you can see in this photo is one example of how we've partnered with a local high school group to develop a unique solution to a barrier that doesn't always stay in the same place, right? So what happens when your hazard moves? What happens when it's a truck and it drives around location and it changes its position every hour? How do you set up barriers and how do you keep yourself from being injured through that hazard? And so this is one example of what the group came up with, and it was called RFID, or radio frequency tagging, where you could actually keep a tag between the person or the hazards on site and the moving object. So no matter what the operation is, no matter where you're located at in the company, whether you're in the field or whether you're in the office, trying to make our operations safer at every step of the process is something that you'll be working on, whether onshore, offshore, or anywhere in between.